so any specific questions on the different forms of irrigation? Yes.
The problem with the drip, I'm wondering about the clogging that's on the ground. How do you see if it's clogged? Do you just open the end and drain it?
That's a great question about clogging and drip systems. If it's underground, how do you know? And that's one of the reasons a lot of people don't like drip. The best way I can deal with that is you got to look at plants. You got to know plants. You got to be able to tell what stress in a plant looks like. So it's not as simple as a spray system. A spray system, you can see the water, everything the ground gets wet. Although I'm sure we've all had experiences with a lawn that you have a dry spot in a lawn and you turn on the spray system and everything's getting wet. It looks fine. But if you put the little cups out and you actually measure the evenness of the watering, you'll find this area is getting 3 times as much as that. Where it's a nozzle that's plugged, but it's not completely plugged. So maybe it's hard to perceive visually, but less water is getting to where it needs to be. So what we do with a drip system, that's my best answer is that you got to keep an eye on the plants. We don't usually bury drip systems. We set them on the surface and then we just cover it with mulch. Now you still can't see it unless you move the mulch, but the mulch, thank you. The mulch is very easy to move out of the way. So if you just want to verify that it's working, you just bend over, you scrape away the mulch, and then you can see it.
Is there a way to unplug it?
I've had such little trouble with plug systems. Usually when I see a plug system, it's because it wasn't installed properly. There is no filter, or it was, a little local box store emitter, not a good quality emitter. That doesn't mean I haven't seen plug emitters. I have. It's just, it seems to be a much more common complaint than I've ever seen. I've installed drip systems that are 25, 30 years old, still working fine. But a fine mesh filter is vital. If you don't have a filter in the line, or if somebody breaks the line and allows dirt to get in and doesn't flush it out before they finish their repair, that's going to go down and plug up emitters. So hopefully that answers the question. Yes?
What about the type of head that goes on top of a riser and it's sort of an umbrella spray? It comes out of little holes, so you don't get the spray or the misting, and I can direct it pretty accurately.
So I'm trying to figure out umbrella spray.
You've got like 4 holes in it and little streams come out of each hole.
Okay, so like a stream bubbler?
A stream bubbler, right.
Stream bubblers are fine. Your only limitation is the distribution. They're not going to spray very far. I think they can go up to a few feet.
Right.
You can say, well, I see it and I have less chance of clogging. So there's a plus there. The negative is your flow is a lot higher, so that you're more likely to get runoff if you need to water deeply. And it's a lot of things sticking out of the ground. What I like about the drip, I do custom residential, high-end, installations where my clients don't expect to see any irrigation products. What I like about my finished products is you just see a beautiful garden. You don't see mechanical things. So, but a lot of fruit tree orchards are irrigated that way. I think that they're fine. It's just I kind of look at it from an efficiency standpoint and an aesthetic standpoint, and so that's why I typically use. Again, we just lay the drip right on the surface of the soil. We verify everything's working, and then cover it with 2 to 3 inches of mulch. The trick with drip, I tell all my clients this, most of them forget, is that before you dig, after the system's in, you always scrape away the mulch, the surface of the soil, just ½ inch or so. If you don't see any tubing, dig. But don't just go right through, because it's easy to damage. That's probably the biggest problem that we have is mechanical damage to the tubing. Although people can mechanically damage PVC pipe too, if you really get into it. We don't, like in our company, we don't install any class a pipe under 2.5 inches, it's all Schedule 40, just because it's harder to break with a shovel. It costs a little bit more. You can't put as much water through the same size pipe, but it's just less chance it's going to get broken. Yes?
Can you say something about bubblers?
Sure. Sure. Bubblers. Yeah, you're right. I should have that on there. So there's the standard flood bubbler, and then there's a stream bubbler. So a flood bubbler is that little tiny head that some of them are adjustable, where the water just kind of drips right down the riser onto the ground. You know, they're really good for roses, for things that you just want to water where you have a basin. A basin is a really great way to minimize runoff, as long as you're not trying to water a large area. Bubblers can get expensive and be labor intensive if you're trying to water a large area, because they don't cover a very big area. You're going to have a lot of them. But they're very effective, like we talked about a minute ago, that you can see the water coming out. They don't, because it's high flow, they don't plug very easily. When you have a drip system, the flow is very low. You're talking about a half a gallon to 1 to maybe 2 gallons per hour versus 5 gallons a minute. I mean, it's night and day. The other thing I wanted to mention is you've got to understand that when you go from a spray system to a drip system, your duration is going to expand greatly. Like we're talking about watering this 2 minutes a cycle, 3 or 4 cycles in the night. A drip system, typical drip system runtime is anywhere from 15 minutes to a couple hours. But you think about the water flow, it's a fraction. I mean, a lot of people make a mistake, even if they go from, if they put MP rotators on here, this is probably the most common mistake, because they really promoted MP rotators, change the spray head to an MP, it turns your head into a rotor head, and they don't adjust the time on the clock. Well, remember what we said? You're only putting 1/3 of the water down now. So that's, if you were watering the appropriate amount with your spray head, and then you don't change the irrigation clock, you're going to think this doesn't work, because your lawn's going to dry up. So you've got to understand how much water your turf uses. So it's pretty easy to remember for cool season turf in this area, it's basically 1 inch a week. So this is what blows people's minds. That means a column of water, so if this was a lawn, that you would have to put 4 feet, a little bit more than 4 feet of water on that lawn to keep it green in this area in 1 year. 4 feet of water. It kind of gives you an idea of cool season. Now that's that's one of the higher end items. There are some plants that use more, but that's kind of the standard for one of the highest water using plants. So drought tolerant or Mediterranean plants could be half or less of that. There's turf grasses that can use half or less than that. So there are some drought tolerant plants that will use 20% of that 4 feet of water. That gives most people a good idea. When you put your hand there and say that's 4 feet, that's how much water it takes to keep a cool season fescue grass looking good. Yes.
Do any of these systems come into play with houses or business, I don't know, use the gray water? Does that connect any of that?
Absolutely. Gray water, though, there's a specific rule about gray water. It's not allowed on a spray system.
Oh,
You're not allowed to broadcast it. It has to be where it's applied directly to the ground. So bubblers, drip system, that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Sure. Good question.
I understand you can't use gray water on vegetables.
Right.
Yeah, I guess it depends on who you talk to. I mean, it used to be where you couldn't even use gray water, and now it's mandatory that not that you have to use it, but the cities can't restrict you from using it, but you got to follow rules about, because there is stuff in there. The thing is about gray water that you really need to know is the soaps that you use in your house, you have to modify them. There's a lot of soaps that say that they're either biodegradable or this or that. What you have to do is read the ingredients. They're going to be on the package. If you see any kind of salts, in those ingredients, I highly recommend you don't use that because you'll kill your plants. So I think it's our greatest source, and we'll go into that. We've got some alternative sources of water, and gray water is probably our best alternative source at this time. Any other questions? Yes?
This may be because of the gray water, slightly off topic, but if you're using like a rain barrel system to irrigate, and you're catching off your roof, and you don't have a first flush system, are you gonna need to be very careful about putting it on your edibles, especially like the parts you eat? Because I keep reading that, and other people say don't even worry about it, and I'm really concerned about
Yeah,
that.
well, like from your roof, what's going to come from your roof? It's going to be bird droppings, and you know, like I kind of live out a little bit in the country. I've got possums, and they, for some reason, like to go up there, do their business. So I could see that being a concern, and the idea is that it just you're not broadcasting it. Again, you're using a system that puts it directly onto the ground, and unless you're growing potatoes or a root vegetable. I'm not an expert in the safety and what goes on there, because I mean, what do? We buy steer manure and throw it all over the place. That seems to be okay. So I'm thinking, you know, again, I'm not an expert in that area, but I would say that if you wash your vegetables thoroughly, I mean, we've been putting all kinds of fertilizers on stuff for all these years. I don't understand why from a bird or a
Well, if you're in a real urban environment, you're probably getting any kind of exhaust or the chemicals would be able to settle.
That's possible. That's possible. But of course, you know, what are you buying in the supermarket? Yes.
I'm just wondering, is there a way to actually test your water? Because there are like
Yes.
pathogen concerns.
Absolutely. We, especially well water, we test. We don't typically test potable water, but yeah, you could take your sample of what comes off your roof or whatever, and you can. A lot of the soil testing labs do water testing as well, and if they don't, they'll probably be able to tell you who does.
Is that pricey or?
Like $100, $150, something like that. Okay. Okay, so I wanted to talk about some of the things that you can do in an existing garden, where maybe it's not so old that you don't need to revamp the whole thing, but you could give it a tune-up. So what we can do to modify. So what you're looking for is when you turn on the system, you're looking for good coverage. You're looking for even precipitation. We call it uniformity. You want a uniform distribution of water over the landscape. Systems are rated by that. If you really get into water management and you want to become a certified water manager, you got to learn all about, you should see the calculations. It's a little overwhelming, but you can get through it, I promise you. But if you want to really become an irrigation expert, you can have a true understanding about exactly how many minutes something should run. But my concern is that a lot of the irrigation experts are challenged with programming clocks. But as you've known through your soils class, to really be a good water manager, you got to know soils, you got to know plants, and you got to know irrigation. If you're a really good soils person, that's great. But if you don't know about distribution uniformity and flow rates and all of that, what's that going to help you? Or if you don't know plants. So it takes quite a bit of education, but you know, there are people that have that, and where they have that concept of that soil-plant-water relationship, and then they can be really good water managers. So replacing and adjusting nozzles. So a lot of nozzles that get damaged, they get turned on heads. Often they don't get installed properly. There's the base of the head, and then there's the nozzle. And a lot of people will spin the nozzle on just so it's in the right direction, instead of making the nozzle tight on the head. And what happens is you walk on it, or water pressure turns it, or the mower rolls over it, and the nozzle starts to turn in funny places. So the first thing I check is I grab the base of the head, and I just make sure the nozzle's secure. And if the nozzle's not pointing in the right direction, I rotate the whole head instead of just the nozzle. That's the first thing I do. Because loose nozzles, you know, if you're spraying the sidewalk and not plants, it's not going to be very good coverage. Then the other thing to do is make sure it's not damaged, it's not plugged up. There's usually a filter screen for each nozzle in a regular spray system. Making sure the filter screen is there, that it's not missing. And then you can see there's in the picture, there's somebody's adjusting with a screwdriver the nozzle. And if you look on the manufacturer page there on the information, that screw is only for about 10 to 15%. You're not supposed to adjust the stream more than 10 to 15% lower than what comes with head. If you're having to crank it down, that means you got the wrong nozzle. So that's another common problem is some landscapers, I won't say all, but some landscapers are a little bit lazy and they just have all 15-foot nozzles in their truck. And they got a 10-foot spot, they take that 15 and crank it down to 10. The problem with that is, it's really convenient for the landscaper. But the problem with it is that nozzle is designed to spray 15 feet. When you crank it down to 10, all that engineering that went into designing that nozzle goes out the window. And the water droplets are not the right size, and then you get this uniformity problem. So most nozzles are marked either a color and or a number on the nozzle. And if it says 15 on the nozzle, that means that nozzle is designed to spray 15 feet. And it'll spray 15 feet if it's within the pressure range that manufacturer spec'd out. If you've got too high a pressure or too low of a pressure, it's probably going to spray less than 15 feet. Now it may sound kind of odd thinking if the pressure's too high, it should spray more. Well, I've seen it where the pressure is so high that it fogs and the water droplets never make it to their destination. So, knowing how to use a water pressure gauge, we were talking a little bit about dynamic pressure. So, there's the pressure that you check at the hose bib, but is that the same pressure that ends up out at the sprinkler head? No. And why is that? Well, the water has to go through a pipe, it has to go through an automatic valve, it has to go through another pipe, it has to go through the sprinkler head, push up a spring, and push that sprinkler head up, and then finally come out of the nozzle. There's no way that you're going to get that for free. The pressure is going to be lower at the head. And let's say you have 15 heads and you have one pipe that's feeding all the heads in a straight line. That first head is going to see more pressure than the last head because as that water moves through the pipe, it's going to lose momentum, which is pressure. So the design of an irrigation system is important, that we have the right size pipe. The larger the pipe, and this is another one that a lot of people really have trouble grasping. I remember being in school where it was a hydraulics class and the professor was describing that if you have a 2-inch pipe and you run 20 gallons a minute through it, or if you have a 1/2-inch pipe and you run 20 gallons a minute through it, which is going to be a higher pressure? And most people pick the smaller pipe. It's going to spray farther. And yes, the velocity will be higher in the smaller pipe, but the pressure goes down because it's taking more force to push that water through the smaller pipe. It's if you have a really big pipe, the water is not being pushed against the walls, it can flow through there really easily. A lot of people make the mistake of, like, if you take a hose and you turn the hose on, the hose sprays out, let's say, just from the water pressure, goes out a couple of feet. But if you put your thumb over it, you can get it to spray 15 feet. Okay, so what's happening? You're increasing the velocity, exactly. But the water pressure, the pressure is actually going to go down.
That's all those physics classes are.
Good? No, that's fine. You know,
I hated them by this stuff.
I love physics. I just thought it was the coolest thing. But it's not a concept a lot of people easily grasp. And the best way, what I did at work is I set it up because I have these guys that have been doing irrigation longer than I have. And they're adamant that using a smaller pipe is going to be higher pressure. So what did I do? I got 100 feet of 1/2-inch and 100 feet of 1.5 inches. Okay? And I put the same sprinkler head on the end of 100 feet, and I put a pressure gauge at the beginning, and I put a pressure gauge right before the head. And that's the only way I could prove to him, because he couldn't argue with it. It's right there in front of his face, that the one with the 1/2-inch pipe, the pressure loss was really high. It dropped like 50% because I was trying to push so much water through a small pipe. I purposely put more water through that pipe than the pipe was designed to handle, just to emphasize the difference between a big pipe and a small pipe. And so a properly designed system, you'll have less pressure loss. So we've solved a lot of problems with using these MP rotator heads, because what did I say? I use 1/3 less, or 2/3 less water. So if a very common problem is a client will tell me, yeah, their line looks really bad, I'll go out there, and I turn on the system, and I turn it on, I'm waiting, and then eventually I start to hear some sound, and then the heads come up. I know right away, just based on my experience, that we've got a problem. Because a properly designed system, you turn the valve on, and within a few seconds, the water should be coming out. What's happening with his system is what we call overextended. He's got too many heads on the line, or the pipe is too small. And so the system is not able to flow properly. And of course, once it does pop up, I can see the heads are only spraying 6 feet when they're a 15-foot head. So he's got all these little green circles through the lawn. Because it's like a bubbler. The spray heads are acting like bubblers. They're not spraying head to head. And so normally, before they came out with these MP rotators, we would have to tear up the whole thing, re-plumb the whole thing because it was plumbed wrong. Well, now I can do the calculations, and I can determine before I dig anything up that all I have to do is change all the nozzles out to an MP rotator system. And now I've got 1/3 of the water flowing through the pipe, so guess what happens to the pressure? It goes back up, because I'm not losing all the pressure trying to push a bunch of water through the pipe. I'm pushing 2/3 less water through the pipe, so I don't lose all that water pressure. And again, I don't expect you to grasp all this right now, because it took me a while, and it takes some people a long time to really understand that. But the client was thrilled, because all he had to do was buy 15 nozzles instead of paying a crew for a week to replumb his whole backyard. So, yeah, they're designed to replace a standard spray nozzle. They're about $5 a piece. There was rebates on them. I think most of the rebates run out, but they'll probably replenish them. Where the water department will pay for a good portion of the cost of the material, not the labor. So, nozzle, so aligning head. So a misaligned head is not going to cover properly. The head is engineered to be perpendicular to the ground. So another common problem you'll see is you have a slope like this, and you see the heads like that. The head straight up and down. You want the head perpendicular to the work. So if it's level, it should always be perpendicular. A lot of people think the head should be just straight up and down no matter where it is. And on a slope, what happens is the water is going to spray much farther and higher, and then mist and not cover properly. It needs to be perpendicular. Yes?
Are there certain companies that make the heads that you find are more efficient than others? Because I've been through quite a few and only seen a few that actually seem to work correctly.
Yeah, there's all kinds of products out there. One of the problems is probably most of the people that you'll be talking to are buying at the box stores. And even some of the manufacturers make sprinkler heads for the box stores, but they're not the same quality as the commercial grade. So again, we talked about Ewing Irrigation, Imperial, Hydroscape, Cranjo. Those folks are going to carry the products that I buy as a contractor, commercial grade. There's other manufacturers that you will not find for sale at the commercial places, and then there's going to be, again, like I said, there are some commercial manufacturers make a lower grade head that you can buy at a hardware store. So my recommendation is to buy your products from one of these commercial suppliers. I'm a big fan of Hunter. They're a local company. I mean, they have tours. I'm kind of geeky about this, but they have this automated system for making sprinklers. That machine, those robots are working 24/7, and it's right in San Marcos. It's an amazing tour. You won't believe your eyes when you think this process is going on in little old San Marcos. And this company originated there. Now they sell product all over the world. I've seen their sprinkler heads installed in the Middle East, in Europe, and it's Hunter. Really, really good engineering company, really know what they're doing, yes.
Did you say they give tours?
Yeah.
And they're very fun.
It blows my mind, I don't know what it's gonna do for you, but I was lucky enough to meet the owner, Ed Hunter, before he passed away many, many years ago, and he ran the tour, and he, smart man, he just said all he did to be successful in business is surround himself with people that didn't know what he knew, smarter people than he was in these areas. And I heard that. I thought, I'm gonna practice that. It should be easy for me to find smarter people. Yes.
Steve, I found there's an online company called sprinklerwarehouse.com that sells all the professional stuff at about 2/3 the price of what you pay at Hydroscapes or elsewhere.
Right.
With also good advice about what to do and in what circumstances.
Good, good. Yeah, I mean, I shop more and more online. It's just so much more convenient. I mean, for our company and our suppliers, we have relationships with them. We get good pricing and great service, you know. I need something, I call them up, and then within an hour or two, it's on the job site. That's, you know, but you know, you spend $100 grand or $200 grand a year with somebody, they tend to like you. So, but yeah, for the internet just makes that kind of service available to a small, you know, buyer. So it's great. So yeah, buying quality product is definitely really important. So again, alignment of heads. You want to make sure the heads are perpendicular. Tilted heads just don't. They're not going to reach the proper distance, and you're going to waste water. Checking the type of head, the spacing, and the location. So is it located in an area where it can actually do its job? Is it the same type of head, all the heads on one valve, one zone? And again, zone and valve are the same thing. I say valve because that's what controls the zone, but you should probably use zone, it's more accurate. So when you turn on the system and a bunch of heads come on, you want to make sure those heads that are all coming on at the same time have the same precipitation rate, that they're putting out the same amount of water. That they're spaced properly, so that properly. The number that's on the head or the color of the head, and these manufacturers make these great booklets, which I may have probably left in my truck. But it gives you all the information about the head, the amount of water it uses, the distance it sprays, the pressure that it should be working at. Of course, this is all available online. There's apps that you can get, or you can just go to their website. But if it says 15 feet on there, that means that your heads should be 15 feet apart. They could be 14 feet because the math may not work out right, but if it's 16 or 17 feet apart, and you're trying to get 100% coverage, you're not going to get it if it's more distant. So, as an irrigation guy, I always carry a wheel and a tape measure with me, because that's one of the other things. If I see I have uneven irrigated areas, that's the first thing to look at is, okay, what's my water pressure? And you do this long enough, you don't even need your pressure gauge. I can just put my foot on top of the pop-up head, and I can kind of feel and know how much pressure. And if you put your foot on it and it won't go down, then you know it's too high. And that's happened before, where I mean, I knew it was going to be high, but I couldn't even move it.
Yeah.
So a head that's supposed to be spraying at 25 psi had 60. And it's just, it's a fog machine. It's not a spray head. So that's important. You can upgrade the irrigation controller, like we talked about before. The old style controllers maybe only have one program, two programs. So you know you can't. I just did a project in La Jolla where the client wanted a separate program for each zone. So he had, I think it was eight zone. Not a big property, 8 zones, but he wanted to independently, he wanted to water some things once a day, he wanted to water other things, once a week, other things every day. He just wanted to have that flexibility where he could have each valve would come on at a different frequency than all the rest. And we found one. There's not a lot of choices there, but we did find actually a couple of companies that make a controller with as many programs as there were zones that you could have on. So the old style were very limited. 1, 2, 3 is the most common. But think about it, if you've got a vegetable garden where you need to water, let's say twice a day, because you just put your little tiny plants in the ground, and then you have pots that you want to water every other day, and then you've got a grove that you want to water once every 20 days. You start running out of programs pretty quickly when you only have 3. You got areas in the sun, areas in the shade. I like at least 4 programs. Even I feel that's limiting if you can find it, but you should start with that. And of course, you want a controller that takes, like we have an example here of a rain sensor that automatically shut the system down. That way, if you're at work and it starts to rain, you don't have to worry. It just turns it off automatically. And then there's moisture sensor, which I think that'll become more and more popular because that's the actual more accurate way. What a moisture sensor is doing is a good moisture sensor is sensing what the roots are sensing. And that's really what you're interested in. So moisture sensors are a real big additive. Rain sensors are cheap, they're like $30. There's even wireless ones now for a little bit more. So it just communicates wirelessly to the controller. Of course, locating and repairing leaks. One of the problems that we have is with these automated systems, you don't even think about it. And we've all seen it. You're going on a walk or driving down the road and somebody's head's broken off and water's flying all over the place. So walking your system on a regular basis. Even with a drip system, I've got to walk my system because, maybe something came loose, or maybe a gopher chewed through the tubing, or an emitter popped off. You never know. And then we're making sure, we talked a little bit about hydrozones, making sure that it might be kind of tough on existing property, especially if it's all over the place. I mean, they got an avocado tree planted right around some Ruslantia and, a bunch of natives, and an avocado tree is a tropical tree. Hate to say it, but it is. I have avocado trees. I think they're great. I love the fruit. I don't have, I don't have 100 of them. I just got enough variety so I get avocados all year round. But it's a heavy water using tree. So I have it on its own zone. Even though it's planted around other fruit trees, that's what I like about drip, is even though it's 10 feet from another tree, the avocados get watered much more often, and kind of the opposite of what we talked about infrequent and deep. Avocados don't have deep roots, and they like to be watered frequently. They don't like to dry out. If you let an avocado dry out, the leaves fall off, whatever fruit set, you could lose that. If it's flowering and something goes awry, you're going to lose your fruit for the year. So they're very temperamental, and so if I install avocado trees, even if it's only 2 trees, you've got to have at least 2 for fruiting avocados, but even if it's only 2 trees, they still have their own zone. Because, I guess I could tie it to if they had a vegetable garden, because that would be a similar water requirement. But I like to do fruit trees on their own zones. If I have stone fruits or citrus have a different water requirement than avocados. They're a subtropical tree, but they don't require as a frequent irrigation. I learned that because my parents have a grove that I grew up working on, and they water about once every 3 weeks during the summer. Wow. Mature trees are probably 80 years old now, even when they were 30 years old. They're a mature tree, they don't need to be watered. A lot of people think they got these fruit trees, they got to water them every twice a week, 3 times a week, what's neat about citrus is when they do get stressed, the leaves will start to fold up a little bit. The tree will tell you when it needs water. And what's nice about citrus is they're very forgiving. Even if they get a little stressed, they'll come right back. You turn the water on the next morning, the leaves are opened up. Some plants aren't so forgiving. They get to that permanent wilting point very quickly before you know it. And, like annuals, a lot of plants just are very unforgiving. But a mature citrus tree, not that you want to go stressing your tree all the time, but at least you can kind of get an idea. The other thing I suggest you do is, with any of your plantings, try shutting the water off and just keeping a close eye. Just do a walk around. And you'll be amazed at how many days can go by before you notice any difference. And then that'll kind of give you an idea of how long you should be irrigating. So back to the spray system, another good challenge for you is to really understand how long you should be watering for. Is turn on if you have a spray system, turn it on, grab a stopwatch, or now with your phones, most phones have a stopwatch in it. Turn it on and watch carefully to see how quickly can you see water starts to go away from what you're trying to water. Sometimes it's hard to tell. If you got a lawn and there's a drain in the lawn, you may not see that water running down the drain. Sometimes you got to locate the drain and then maybe you cut the grass around, pull the cap of the drain off, and as soon as you see water start to go into that drain, look at how many minutes have gone by and definitely water a little bit less than that. That's a great way to determine a runtime for a zone that you have, because there's so many variations here. So, you might have rotors, you may have spray, you may have this manufacturer, that manufacturer, but that's really the true test. It's just turn on the system. And if it's on a slope, wait till you see that water start to run down. Whatever that is, you need to back off at least a minute or two before that. And that should be your maximum duration. And then, now you just got to figure out, okay, to get the water down as deep as I want, how many times do I have to repeat that cycle? And generally, the rule of thumb is you should have an hour between your cycles. So those start times, I usually do 2 hours just to be sure. If you have the time in the day, great. If you don't, then I'd say an hour is a good enough time for that water to be applied to the soil, for the soil to take in the water as slowly as it does. An hour later, you should be able now to refill that top section of soil. Yes?
I know how many good slides you have left, and I promised I would goose you, so
Okay.
here's your goose.
Thank you. So these are just some examples of things that you see out there. Of course, either a broken pipe or just watering way too long, watering way too long is probably the biggest offense that you'll see, is that those durations are too long. Misdirected heads. A lot of people call me up saying, my sprinkler is leaking. Well, it's not the sprinkler that's leaking, it's the valve that's leaking. This sprinkler does not have the capacity to not let water out of itself. It's open. It's the device that sends the water down the pipe is not shutting off completely. That's what the problem is. And you're going to find that that's going to be the lowest head, or one of the lowest heads on the system, because as we all know, gravity takes over and the water is going to show up at the lowest point. So when you see just a wet area always around the head, that means your valve is what we call weeping. It's closed, but it's not closed all the way. It's sort of like a leaky faucet. Commonly, when I get called out on projects, it's not even the irrigation system, the water bill's so high. I almost always find it's the toilet. Because the toilet leaks into itself. It doesn't dump on the floor. It's not like a kitchen faucet where you can see it dripping, or a shower head. It goes just down the drain. You don't see it. So always check that. And the easy way to do it is go out to your water meter, open up the lid, clean off the faceplate, and then shut the water off to the house. Usually there's a valve that just runs the house. And watch your water meter. And first, before you shut off the house, if you see the meter is just barely moving, which is basically the sign of a leak, as long as nobody's home flushing toilets or anything, if you see that meter is just barely moving, shut the water off to the house, and then go back to the meter. If it stops moving, you know your leak is inside the house. If it continues to move, then your leak is somewhere between the house and the meter, which is probably your irrigation system. So make sure I covered. So efficiency, depending on how much you have to spend, will determine if you revamp and put a whole new system in, or you can just patch it. So some problems of poor uniformity. Again, so here's a picture of the soil probe, which again is another tool. So we have the soil moisture sensor. This is actually, I'm sure you learned in your soils classes about this tool. This way you can get a look at the soil, what kind of the profile, and to see if there's any roots in it, and then where it goes from wet to dry. But commonly you'll see these there. Sometimes it's a disease, sometimes some fungus will cause, and it looks like a dry spot. Sometimes it's pet urine will do it. Get these little circles. It's really easy usually to tell pet spots, because what you'll get is a centered dead spot, And then you'll have, right around the outside edge of that dead spot is the most beautiful green turf you've ever seen, which is just the right amount of nitrogen. And then you have your lawn, which is maybe okay after that. That's almost always the sign of a pet spot. And anybody who has dogs probably knows that for whatever reason, I'm sure there's a scientific reason, female dogs are more potent, their urine will kill grass better than male. I don't know exactly what's going on there, but I do know it. I had a client with 3 female dogs, the lawn looks so bad. So keeping plants alive under the current water restrictions. So a lot of people didn't think about this, but they stopped watering their lawns, not looking up and saying, oh, there's a tree here. Now, some trees are pretty tough and don't need that excess water, but there's others that are used to having, or have the need for water, and all of a sudden that is no longer there. And they don't just look like a lawn where all of a sudden you can tell they're stressed. It may take months, and then maybe it's too late by the time you discover it. So keep an eye on your trees. Know what kind of tree you have, and what the water requirements are. You may need to supplemental irrigation. At my parents' house, they've been in their house now 52 years, in the same house. And they planted eucalyptus trees out of a pony pack, okay? I mean, literally, told me. 6 trees in a pack, they have 6 eucalyptus trees. They're 100 feet tall. And I was noticing the other day that there was a lot of leaf drop all over the place. And so it's a blue gum eucalyptus, really huge tree, massive tree. And they couldn't believe it, but I told them that they needed to supplementally irrigate that tree because they had cut back on their water everywhere. They didn't realize that even though it's a fairly drought-tolerant tree, it still needed some moisture. I said, when we have the really dry winters, you need to irrigate this tree because this tree's 100 feet tall, it's about 20 feet from the house. You don't want that tree getting weak and falling over because there's not going to be any house left. So keep an eye on the trees. Again, know what tree you have. You can look it up if you're not familiar with it. I'm also a certified arborist, so if you want to ask me, I can help you with that. Perennials. Again, as I stated before when there was all those foreclosures, I saw many perennials that actually did pretty well with very little water, but there's some that aren't going to do well. So you just gotta, don't just turn off the water, but make sure you look at everything surrounding the garden, that you're taking care of it. Natives and drought tolerant. Again, when we have a really dry winter, that's when natives are alive and growing. They actually go dormant in the summertime, typically, unless we irrigate them all year long. But really, established natives don't typically, if they're drought-tolerant natives, they don't need to be watered during the heat of the summer. They actually go into dormant state. They never get a rest if you're irrigating them. So, but during the summer or during the winter, if we don't get rain, now this year we don't have to worry about it, but past years, 4 years in a row, we got very little rain during the winter, and it stresses those plants out. So if you're gonna, you got to pay attention to that, and if we have a dry winter, then you should irrigate based on the plant material. Okay, additional water sources. So gray water systems we've talked about, rain catchment, wells, leach fields, overwatering by neighbors, streams, and springs. So, just to give you an example, I have a bordering neighbor. And it's got to be 200 feet of border. And within 15 feet, 20 feet of that border, I don't have any irrigation. And I've been there 10 years.
Wow.
Okay, so pay attention. There may be able to save more water than you think. Because he's doing plenty of it, right? Rain catchment, great idea, wrong place.
Yeah.
I usually get a lot of grief about that. I have clients that put in rain catchment, I'm happy to do it for them, but I'm very straight with them. You are not doing this to save money. You are doing this to save water. Because if you, I mean, people don't realize water costs a half a cent a gallon right now. And that's what the increased rates, 1/2 cent a gallon. And I don't want you to waste water because it costs 1/2 cent a gallon when this costs $1. It's ridiculous, you know. People complain about the price of gasoline. This is what they should be complaining about, bottled water. So the problem is that we only get rain during the winter, typically. Spring and winter, when we don't need to put it on the ground. It's already there. We don't get rain in the summer. So it's great in Arizona, because in Arizona, they get rain in the summer. So rain catchment there makes perfect sense. There's payback on rain catchment in Arizona, or in certain places where they get rain during the winter, because they can use that water up in a month. The problem with rain catchment is storage. Storage costs a fortune. I mean, you see a rain barrel, 55-gallon rain barrel costs $75. You do the math and tell me what's the payback. Financially, there isn't one. It doesn't work. The rain barrel will wear out long before you've ever paid for it. You would do it just because you're a fanatic about saving water, which I salute. But I just don't want to lead my clients into thinking that they're going to save money by putting in rain catchment. The reason gray water works is because you really don't want to catch the gray water. You just want to put it directly out into the yard. And you're producing gray water every day. So that's why I feel gray water works. Of course, water wells are great if you can afford to dig a hole that deep. And you know, wells start at about 25 grand by the time you dig the hole and put the pump in the ground. Now, if you have a big property and your water bills are $1,000 a month, well, it can pay for itself pretty quickly. But if you have a smaller property, a more average-sized property, it's going to be hard to justify until the price really starts to go up with.
The thing with rainwater also is it's better quality for some plants.
Absolutely.
Japanese maple.
Absolutely. Back to the Japanese maple. You know, you can pour this on it. It gets kind of expensive, but if you want a Japanese maple without discolored leaves after a while, rainwater is by far the best. It's pure. And I wish we got more of it more often.
In the book we read, it said that it infiltrates into sandy soil slower than regular tap water. Do you know why?
No, I have no idea. Never heard that before. Really? Pure water would infiltrate the soil slowly.
Yes.
That's interesting. The reason I bring up leach fields is because I have a property, and a lot of my clients have properties where they're not on sewer, they're on septic. Well, those leach fields are only a couple feet below ground, and your plant material actually can benefit from growing over a leach field. My parents, it's in their orange grove, so they rarely fertilize, I would say. So. We got overwatering by neighbors. I've had only a couple of projects where they actually have a natural stream running through the property, and that's a place to grab some water. And springs, not very common around here again. But these are just some other options. So health risks guidelines. So gray water, as we spoke about, you cannot distribute it with a spray system. It needs to apply directly to the ground. We usually use a leach system where it's below ground. So like a French drain, use a pipe with holes in it, and you use gravity fed, and then you should have a bypass valve because you don't want to have to overwater. If you do a lot of laundry or whatever you're doing, you can overwhelm. I usually do it for fruit tree grows, things like that, or it just depends on the slope of the terrain. Anytime you have to store the water, that's when you got to store it where there's no sunlight in it because algae will grow, it'll smell. It's a real challenge. So that's why like I said, gray water I think is a way to go. Rain catchment. What I do for rain catchment is all my rainwater stays on my property. So rain chains and grading the property so that the water doesn't run off onto the street. Okay. Even though it may not be used for a long, long time, it's better because we'll talk about here in stormwater catchment. You know, we know that our beaches get shut down after that first flush. It's really bad news, and the more water we can keep on site, the less that's going to happen. I won't spend too much time on this because I don't have it, and I know you guys just went over this. Ground cover mulch. Huge fan of ground cover mulch. I think this has saved me more water than anything on my property. And I can tell because I see my neighbor's property, same kind of soil right across the street. He has to water so much more often than I do. I mean, and all I have to do is pull that mulch back, and it's cool and it's wet. So it's a great weed barrier because weed seed generally will not germinate where it doesn't have sunlight. Now, if you have perennial weeds, that's going to come up because that's already a live plant that can poke through. But most seed, which is where a lot of your weeds come from, just has no chance. And if it does, let's say you've had mulch there a long time and it's composted, if the weed's just growing in the mulch, it pulls out really easily because it's just growing in mulch. Erosion control. We use this on steep slopes all the time, and this is the mulch that basically what happens is folks like me, our dumpsters go to a recycling facility, they take all the cuttings, they grind it up, they compost it. The company I use, the owner is a soil scientist, so she makes sure that the product that they sell back to us, it's kind of a great deal. You know, we pay to have it hauled away, and then we pay to have it brought back. I don't know why I didn't think of businesses like this a long time ago. It kind of weaves together. So the reason it's great for erosion control is because when we get rain, erosion is caused by the rain mechanically hitting the soil and building up speed and taking soil with it. Well, if you've got 2 or 3 inches of mulch, it's like this insulating blanket. It softens the water drops. It allows them to soak in instead of run off. It just has all these amazing properties. So it keeps the soil cooler so it doesn't evaporate the water that gets into it. I think it has aesthetic value because instead of just bare ground, you have a nice finished looking product when you're done with your landscape. It decomposes and adds organic matter to your soil, and which helps build soil structure. It gets that microbial activity going. So those are just all the great reasons I could think of. And it's cheap. It's a recycled material. We get it for around $10 a cubic yard. You try buying that stuff, buying other products in the store. We buy it in bulk. It doesn't come in bags. It just comes in we have it dumped on site. But number one, least expensive, quickest way to improve the health of your garden and reduce your water usage and lower maintenance. So, talk briefly about watershed. Just remember that every product you put down in your garden can end up into the ocean, because a lot of people don't realize that the stormwater is not treated. Your sewer is treated, hopefully, but the stormwater goes directly into rivers, which goes directly into the ocean. So, dog waste, pesticides, grass clippings, trash, and what we call first flush is after a real long dry season, which is what we have every year, and then you have that first big rain. You see it on the news. This beach is closed, that beach is closed, because all the stuff that's been accumulating in gutters and oil from cars on the street and brake dust and all that stuff goes right, it's the highest concentration goes right into the ocean, and then they got to close the beach. So, where does that water go? As we said, right into the ocean. I got a little ahead of myself here. So, who's responsible for the water that runs off of your property? It's you. It's you. Or me.
It's good contractor.
And then again, it's just, we don't realize it all the time because we live here, but San Diego is a huge tourism area, and when the beaches are closed, that's going to hurt business. Now, maybe we want that. We don't want so many people here. It depends on how you look at it. So, best management practices. The idea of BMPs is what you're doing to preserve the environment, to do your best to have the least amount of impact on, negative impact on the environment. So, creating hydrozones, making sure that you're not planting tropicals with, natives, and so that way you don't have to overwater one thing to water something else properly. Typical thing that people do with their lawns, they got a dry spot, turn up the time. To me, you got a dry spot, find out why you have a dry spot. And then as soon as you find the dry spot and you fix it, the problem, then try backing off on the water until you find the next dry spot, and then fix that one. And then you'll find over time that you'll be able to irrigate a lot less by just having a more uniform irrigation system. Apply the right amount of water. Talked about that today. Water plants deeply and infrequently in general. That's what you want to do. Water early in the morning. The reason we don't water in the day or the afternoon is because we have the evaporation, we have wind, and we don't want the water sitting on the plants all night long. The reason I water early in the morning is because as soon as the irrigation cycles are done, the sun comes up, dries off the plants. And they've done studies where if you water at 6 o'clock at night or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, that water sits on those plants a much longer period, and you have a chance for more fungus problems. Avoid deep percolation and runoff. So what we're saying is don't overwater, don't water beyond the root zone. It's a total waste. Now, if you have a lot of salts in your soil, you may have to leach out. You may have to get those salts away from the root zone, but we don't have to go 2 feet below. You just want to get it below the root zone. And of course, uniformity. It's all about uniformity. Adjust irrigation and reset irrigation as the weather and seasons change. It's a constant job here in California, Southern California, as example by the weather we have today. Make sure just because it's automatic that you're still checking it, that you don't just forget about it. The mulch does decompose. Usually once a year you're going to use about 1 inch a year, depending on the mulch that you use. So if you put 3 inches of mulch down, I would say once a year, maybe twice, or once every other year, depending on how fast your mulch decomposes, you need to replenish it. And then make sure if you do one of the unlucky ones where you got clay or sandy soil, that you need to add organic matter, because organic matter works well in both. In clay, it helps break up the particles and create better infiltration rate for the water, and in sand it helps hold moisture because it has such a high infiltration rate, there's nothing to hold on to the moisture. So keep that in mind. So the best management practices for irrigation, all those things we talked about. And if you do any grading or you have any bare soil, make sure you use like wattles or anything to help stabilize so that soil doesn't run off, because that's another thing that can cause the beaches to be shut down. The whole idea, like I said, on my property, I've graded it. Water that used to run off the road right up against my property and make gullies along the edge of the asphalt, I put, I dug it out and I put cobble in there, so now it's directed onto my property from the side of the road. So I get the benefit of that water goes deep into my soil. It doesn't run down the street. If everybody would do that, we probably would have little or no flooding. Understand the plant water needs, really know your plants, maintain a healthy soil. Healthy soil means that you have a lot of organics. You have, the microbes are busy. They got things to do. You're giving them things to eat. Having an efficient irrigation system, making sure each valve, you're not having to overwater something to keep something else alive. So, I don't know how well you can see that. It's one of our projects. We did this one in Alpine. It's it was quite a project. It was for a wedding. And
I see it. I was trying to see if I can see it better.
it's a night shot. I got some day ones too on my website, but it was, yeah, it's just that. Back away. Anyway, it mostly, it was all drought tolerant. Bunch of oaks and sycamores, and we did sycamores in the low areas, and then a bunch of oak trees around here. And our challenge was we had to put it in 10 weeks, and it was it was almost $500,000 worth of work.
Wow.
And I was the only one crazy enough to sign the contract, so I had a clause that I had to pay $1,500 a day for every day we were late. Because with a wedding, you can't be late for the wedding, right? smallest company, and that shows how crazy I am, because we're the least likely to finish on time, because we had the least capacity, but we finished on time. I negotiated a deal. I said, if I'm gonna sign that, I said, I wanna be paid if I'm done early. And what does the client say to me? He says, I don't care if you're done early. As long as you're done on time.
Doesn't matter.
But I've learned over the years, don't let go of it. So we negotiated, I get $1,000 a day for every day I was early. And we were gonna, he could see near the end that we were gonna finish early. He was so elated that he says, he puts his arm around me, he says, Steve, he says, even if you don't finish the full 10 days early, I'm still gonna give you 10 grand.
We're not giving you 10 grand.
No,